Hey everyone, Dr. Frunkey here with an awesome new knife consult for you on a truly special piece from TJ Fischer. If that name isn't familiar to you, maybe think of the last name. TJ Fischer is the brother of Frank Fischer, the gentleman who makes the Battle and who made this Talon that I own, and one of the biggest grail makers in the game right now. And he is also the son of Todd Fischer. Todd Fischer being the father of Frank, and TJ, who is in fact Todd Jr. This model is called the Lash. This is a knife made exclusively by Todd Jr., TJ, I should say. And it's a very interesting piece because TJ is relatively new to the custom knife making game, but he has quite the lineage and training backing him up. And so it's interesting for me to get this knife in hand. I have had quite a few people ask me what the sort of status of TJ is, and so it's been great to learn a little bit about him. Thank you, TJ, for talking to me about the knife and about how you came into the knife game, and I'm looking forward to talking about this knife. So before we dive into any more of the story of the knife, let's go ahead and get some numbers and get some vital signs on this model called the Lash. The Lash is about 3 to 3 1/4 inches of blade length right here. I'm going to get right up on it. You're really looking at about 3 inches of blade length on this knife. 3 inches, 7 1/4 inches of overall length, 4.1 inches of handle length right here. So it is a compact model. This knife was designed to be a smaller version of a knife that he did with his brother called the Launch. So let's go ahead and talk about TJ's progress through knife making. In 2015, he joined up with his brother, Frank, and started working with Frank in the shop. And at that time, there were some knives that were released as Fischer Brothers knives. Their knife that they made together was called the Launch, and it was a large Warncliffe style knife with a similar looking handle to this, slightly larger than this, probably about a 3.5 inch knife. It was a very cool knife. And what happened during that time is that TJ trained with Frank, he trained with his father, and he trained with some of the other guys who frequent that shop, including the awesome Stan Wilson. And so he's got quite a bit of input into how to make a beautiful, functional, and awesome knife. And so it's interesting to see how this has manifested in these knives. He has started charging quite a bit for his knives, TJ has. And so the main question that I seem to get is, do I think that the value is there? Now, understanding that TJ comes from this lineage of legendary knife makers sort of gives credence to his expertise and the specialness of this knife and why he might charge a lot of money. But let's go ahead and figure out a few more things. I want to bring out another couple of knives for a quick size comparison. I said this was a 3-inch blade, so that's going to be remarkably similar then to the Spyderco Para 3. So you'll see it's quite a small knife. And I really like to see custom knives in the smaller range. It just kind of makes for an easier carry. There's the Para 2. You can see it's absolutely humongous right next to it. Let me bring out another couple of knives, some higher end knives. Here's the BBM. So you'll see it's quite small, just like the BBM over here. And why don't I bring out another special knife that I just have sitting here, the Philippe Georget FIF 20. So this is about a 3.5 inch knife right here. So you can see nice small size on the Lash. Move these out of the way. This thing is a full custom knife. The weight is to be expected a bit heavier than a traditional EDC knife. So right at about 6 ounces of all this Mokutai and titanium and Sanmai. So without much further ado, let's break this knife down anatomically and see what we're working with. Up front is this beautifully done harpoon drop point Sanmai blade. So this is going to be some Chad Nichols Sanmai, beautifully polished and then etched. Something that I've noticed, despite how much I do try to clean this knife, there is a bit of A bit of some markings there on the finish that may just be grain of the steel. I'm not really sure, but on the back too, a little bit on the shiny side. I can't seem to clean that off. I've used oil, I've used alcohol, I've used soap, I've used microfiber cloths. It just seems to be there. What I will say is that TJ has clearly learned how to grind a beautiful blade. This is very reminiscent of some of Frank's sort of looks and Stan Wilson's look and Todd's look. I'm not saying that it is a copy, but it's obvious that he has trained under these folks because it's a beautiful hollow grind, a hollowed swedge with the harpoon look, a bit of a slight recurve, and it's just a beautiful blade. To be perfectly honest, it's really nice. And TJ really knows how to put a sharp edge on these knives. He does some pretty cool videos where he does some push cutting, where he actually lays a piece of paper flat on the table and he pushes against it and he cuts through it. I mean, I guess that's an indicator of how sharp something is. I'm not entirely sure, but I will say this thing is crazy sharp. Now, the Nick Shabazes of the world might freak out that there's this kind of a grind at the heel of the blade, but this is a stylized thing that I believe they do on purpose to make it look this way. Frank does his grinds in a similar way, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a very artistic knife. This really goes beyond the role of just useful EDC and goes much farther into the art knife category, and so we will allow it some of these sort of eccentricities. Moving back here, let's talk about the pivot. This is running on some ball bearings, and cage ball bearings. Very smooth action, nice detent. A bit on the light side for the detent. Not ultra light, but maybe a medium light. Certainly the blade is not going to shake out of the handle, but I think you can limp wrist it just a little bit. So one thing that if I were placing the custom order, I might ask for a stronger detent. That's often something that custom makers can change before they send you your knife. So that's not necessarily representative of all of his work, just of this knife. Quite a nice action on it, though. The blade obviously flies right out. The flipper placement is excellent, 90 degrees to the pivot with an excellent geometry when you push the flipper tab, so the blade flies right out. Really nice action, and as you can see, the blade can be just shaken closed very easily. Ceramic detent on the inside right here, and taking a look at it is indeed shaved down, so it does give a very smooth closing action. This is not the most drop shutty knife, but it has that quality feeling of resistance that like a Rolls-Royce door has. You know what I mean? It's a very nice, solid, smooth feeling. Looking at the pivot hardware, you can see that also similar to his kin, he has made these beautiful pivots with very intricate collaring. Frank is known for his very characteristic 10-point pivot. For a long time there, for a couple of years, TJ was actually the one making all of these pivots. I remember some of the posts that these guys were making where TJ was sort of training, and he made a whole lot of those, and so it's interesting to see how he represents that ideology in his work, and it's a beautiful pivot, understated but also beautiful. It's really not overdone like the Frank pivot is. It's really quite nice. This has Mokutai on the center, and then a titanium ring, and then another Mokutai pivot collar going on right there. It's all flush to this really nice bolster. Speaking of which, let's talk about the handles. This is done as a bolster lock construction right here, which is really, really nice. Bolster locks are sort of just a super classy option to me. It's sort of a nice compromise between the liner lock and the frame lock. You get the robust frame lock, at least the robust look of the frame lock because it's still cut out right here. But you get the ergonomic comforts of a liner lock, and I really like that. Beautifully done here. Very, very seamless integration of the Mokutai onto the orange peeled titanium bolsters. Beautiful transitions here. Take a look here at the top and the way that it's all flush. Very, very nice. I will say that TJ certainly pays attention to detail. There are no areas on this knife where it seems like, oh, that wasn't looked at, that wasn't taken care of. That can even be represented by taking a look inside of these liners and seeing that the entire inside is jeweled, machine turned, beautifully done. You can see it poking through on the back here. Very nicely done. So every single molecule of this knife has been touched and polished and cleaned. If you look on the inside of the back spacer, you'll see the initials, you'll see the name TJ Fischer on that half-length Mokutai back spacer. Take a look at how flush that is. Just so nicely done. It's very clean. Very, very nicely done. Nice coloration too. I'm not a huge fan of the golds on Mokutai. They tend to show fingerprints a little bit more. I just cleaned my hands right before this video, but pretty dramatic difference when you wipe this off with some alcohol. But that is the nature of Mokutai. There is a 3D machined, 3D, I guess, sculpted pocket clip made of titanium, also beautifully orange peeled to match with hidden hardware. Very, very nicely done. Honestly, this is a really beautiful knife. I think there is a lot of questions surrounding TJ Fischer and his work because it's kind of unclear about whether or not he has the same characteristics as his father and his brother with regards to knife making. Now, is this knife equivalent to a Todd Fischer? No. Is it equivalent to a Frank Fischer? No. But what I will say is that TJ is making a name for himself. He has struck out on his own, and he's got a number of models that he has been making, and with each one, you can see that his skills and his confidence, etc., are improving. And to be coming from a family like the Fischers with the training that he has, I do believe that he will be making some very covetable grail pieces in the future, and I wish him all the best. I don't know anything about the family dynamics, and I'm not going to comment on any of that right now, but what I will say is that TJ has some serious potential. This knife is excellent. It's hard for me to say that someone should pay the $3,800 that this knife costs to a knife maker that's relatively new. However, that being said, it's hard for me not to say that a knife maker trained by Todd, Frank, and Stan Wilson is going to do a bad job. This guy's doing a pretty good job, and I think he's really finding his own voice and finding his own design language. And to be honest, I like the guy because he has a knife called the Kamehameha. And if you are a guy from my generation, from my time period, Goku and Dragon Ball Z was probably influential in your young male life. And so that's just cool to me too. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think of the TJ Fischer Lash. Certainly keep an eye out for TJ and the knives that he's making. I think that he's going to be someone to seriously watch. And I think that he's really holding up his family's lineage. I do not think that he is doing a disservice in any way to the Fischer name, and I think that he'll only get better from here. So go ahead and click like and subscribe to my YouTube channel here. Head over to Instagram and follow me as Dr. Frunkey. Follow TJ Fischer at TJ Fischer. And as always, guys, take care.